The Health Fluoridation Act offers protection from rights of action for water supply authorities. If fluoridation is completely safe, why would such a preemptive legislative measure be necessary?
Well, of course, it's outrageous, really, isn't it? You can't sue the government for fluoridating your water, even if it's shown to be harmful. I think that's obviously wrong in principle, isn't it?
What would it take from a political and legislative perspective to halt fluoridation in Victoria, and what would it take to remove it from areas already fluoridated?
Well, I guess it would take a change in public perception, and that would, to a large extent, mean public knowledge. Now, you have to acknowledge, I think, that the scientific studies are not all against fluoride, but it would take people knowing more about the science, I think, and seeing that it's much more dubious than the pro-fluoride people generally claim, I think.
So what if you feel, if it got to the point where people understood they didn't want to have it, from a legislative perspective, I asked the question again, what would it take to halt fluoridation?
Well, at the moment, I think there are 3 candidates who are standing in the state election, and voting for them after they vote for the DLP would probably be a good start.
Cool. And what would it take to remove it from the areas?
And that would probably be harder, I think. Look, I think it'd take a fundamental shift in people's perception about the value of fluoride. You know, at the moment, probably, it's like any issue, most people actually don't care one way or the other and leave it to others to decide. But of those who do have care, it's probably 2 to 1, probably mildly in favour of fluoride. And you probably have to change that to being 2 to 1 mildly against it, you know.
Without referenda, how can community feelings be properly gauged? Thus, how can someone like yourself adequately represent the community?
Well, I guess you look at things like letters to the editor and speaking with people, and the sort of... When you discuss this issue, if there are public meetings and so on, there have been huge public meetings in Geelong, hundreds of people, 500, 800 people. Down in Warrnambool, I think there are about 1,000 people. Biggest meeting they've ever had, I think, in Warrnambool against fluoride. It's pretty clear that a lot of people are very concerned about it, and you meet individuals who say they've been made sick through fluoride, and they're not pretending. I mean, there's medical evidence for it, but there is medical evidence that fluoride does adversely affect some people at least. Perhaps they have particular susceptibility, but there are people who are harmed by fluoride, by drinking fluoride.
But I have to go back again about the question of referenda. In Mildura, they did a referendum, and 96% of the population who participated in that referendum said no. That was presented and tabled, and yet it was still ignored, and fluoride has gone in. Now, if that's just one community, there's many communities in Australia, and they're not given the chance for referendum. As for letters to the editor, they don't get past the editor. I only know personally of one newspaper that actually publishes letters.
Yes.
If people have sent letters in, especially in Queensland is the case, they're not even published.
Well, you're talking to someone who's just a member of a party where we had a campaign and didn't get a mention in the newspaper or television during the whole campaign.
Yes.
And though it looks like we've probably won anyway, we do understand it's difficult to put your point of view. It's much more difficult than it should be, I think. I mean, if you're looking for forum, probably the Talkback Radio is a very good one. Well, I would still try letters to the editor, even though it's pretty hard. I've never had a letter to the editor published in The Age, although I've probably sent in 100 or 200 of them to The Age, so it's pretty difficult to get them published. I know that.
So the issue of referendum, do you think that is a democratic right?
I think so, yeah. I think, as I said, democracy really means local people deciding local issues. Not just fluoride, but I think fluoride's a typical one. If there were one town where, everyone wanted fluoride, then they had it, be fair enough. And then the next town, if they didn't want it,
yes,
they shouldn't get it. So
and that is democracy.
That's real democracy, I think, where most people get what they want from the system, and not just elect a federal government that decides the whole country has it or doesn't have it,
Yes.
or a state government.
So what are you personally hearing from your constituents, and are people concerned about fluoridation?
In Geelong, I think they are concerned about fluoridation. I've had a lot of people expressing concern to me, and I'm sure they're concerned when you go to one meeting of 600 or 700 people in Geelong, and another one of 500 or 600 people. I mean, you don't get people out into a hall on a political issue unless they really are concerned, and it's pretty hard to get anyone away from a TV set. To go and sit in a big hall is very difficult.
Okay. What do you believe are the ethical or even legal implications of using public water systems to deliver drugs?
Well, look, I think it should only be done with, I'm not sure whether you'd call fluoride a drug, maybe, I'm not sure what the correct terminology would be. Under the Poisons Act, it is actually a poison. But look, I think the European Court of Justice got it right, that you don't medicate people without their permission. And, you shouldn't be giving it, even if it were good for people, it should only be done with their consent.
If fluoride is forced into water, what would stop other drugs also being forced into water supplies to treat the human body?
Well, drugs or medical, therapeutic, I don't know what you'd call it, but look, I suppose in the long term not much would stop it, would there? But in the practical terms, I don't know that there's any other plans for delivering another medication through the water supply. I'm not sure. I don't know of another one, but I think in summary the evidence that it's beneficial is pretty weak. The evidence that it's harmful is plausible. In that situation, you're better off being careful and not adding the stuff to your water supply.
I actually have one more question which has come to mind. In America, on the American Dental Association's website, there is a warning to mothers to not use fluoridated water in infant formula. However, no such warning exists on any Australian Dental Authority website. Why do you think this is so, and shouldn't it be a moral obligation to warn mothers not to use fluoridated water, which is at least 100 times more than is found in natural breast milk?
Look, I think America does lead on this kind of consumer protection sometimes. For example, we've just got the ingredients or chemical content of food listed now. I think they've had that for 30 years or something in America. So in certain respects, America is a leader and we're a follower, I guess. Interesting on the fluoride, because I believe that on most fluoride toothpaste it will actually say do not swallow. So and there have been cases where people have successfully sued for swallowing fluoride, and yet we're deliberately adding it to water supply. Fluoride, apparently, it's been shown now, any benefit is topical. It's from contact with the tooth. But, you might benefit from putting mercurochrome on a cut on your hand. Doesn't mean you drink a bottle of mercurochrome, does it?
That's right. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Oh, I think you've covered it pretty thoroughly.
Thank you very much for your time.
I think they should come out in favour of plebiscites as a condition to fluoridation. I think generally speaking that if it is a requirement, most people will vote against compulsory fluoridation. There are good reasons to vote against it if you've got the chance, and I think politicians should support that view, and they should tell members of their party and argue for that position within their own parties.